Well, perhaps one of the sassiest lines to be thrown around the playground is, "You're not the boss of me. You are not the boss of me. You are not the boss of me." I mean, that pretty much says it all right there. The default sentiment of the human heart, you're not the boss of me. And we don't have to teach our kids that. They don't come out, wanting to not be in charge. They want to be in charge. You don't have elementary school kids saying, I'm so glad I have so many people bossing me around. You don't have junior hires going, it's great to have all these authority figures over me telling me what to do. You don't have people in the workforce going, I'm glad I have so many bosses and managers, dictating my schedule. No, people want to be, as a default position, unfettered and in charge of whatever they want to be in charge of. And that's kind of how we are as human beings. And yet real life is that we have all kinds of people telling us what to do. I mean, you can't get away from it. Even if you're a kid, you start with your parents. They're always bossing you around, telling you what to do. You get into school, you got teachers. You get into life, get into sports, you got coaches. And then even in the games, you got umpires. You go get better at your sport. You got trainers. You've got things in your workplace. When you start working, you got bosses and managers. Then you may climb the ladder. You still got stockholders and board members and people you've got to answer to. In the work world, you've got all of that. And then in your civic life, you've got police officers, you've got people making laws, you've got civic authorities, municipalities, you've got governmental officials, you've got the IRS, the list goes on. A lot of people telling you what you have to do. Then you go to church and you learn about God. God's got all of this authority now, and the preacher's always talking about He's in charge, He's the ultimate authority, He's the sovereign authority. And as hard as that is for us free-thinking sinners to wrap our mind around, it's something that by God's grace, a lot of you in this room have come to grips with. As a matter of fact, you have, by God's grace, willingly put yourself under God's authority, and you've said, I am willing to recognize Him as the authority. He's God, I'm not, and I'm recognizing that and going to live in that regard, and I'm even going to enthrone His Son, His Christ. He's going to be my King, as we've put it in this series, and I'm going to submit to His leadership. Well, He certainly presented Himself that way in the Bible and in the passages we've been studying here in the latter part of Luke. He breaks onto the scene in human history and does all these things to try and verify clearly in the minds of everyone that sees Him that He is unique and unprecedented in His authority. And then as we've recently been studying here in Luke 19, He comes into the city fulfilling all this Old Testament prophecy, presenting Himself in light of His Zechariah's promises as the great authority. He comes to the planet and says, I'm the world leader. And all of that presented to us in Scripture by God's work in our lives. Some of us have said, that's right, He is our King. But that didn't go well. All that usurping of authority in people's mind, all the people having to get out of the way as people laid down their cloaks in the street and waving palm branches and claiming that He's the King, it doesn't go over well in people's minds. As a matter of fact, they are going to say, this guy has no right having that position, not only in your life, but in anybody's life, and we certainly don't want him thinking that he is the authority, and certainly I'm not going to recognize him as the authority. It became the charge that got him crucified. That's what they say. In Luke chapter 23, it says that he is being reported to the authorities as usurping and being an insurrectionist of the Roman Empire. He's telling people not to be obedient and submissive to Caesar, and that's not right. Matter of fact, the sign they put over his head, they scrawled over the cross and tacked to the cross, said, here he is, here's your king. I mean, that's his claim. Of course, he's not. We're killing him right now, but he claims to be the King of the Jews. But again, you sit here and sing songs as though he is the king. And you and I have recognized, yeah, that's the truth. I can't deny it anymore. He's hunted me down in my own heart, and I realize he's in charge, and I recognize he's not only the King of the Jews, but according to the promise of Abraham in Genesis 12, he's the King of the Gentiles as well. And now that he's come and established his authority and verified his position, we live under his authority. And yet, much like when we were kids, we realize we try to march into the world as Christians, trying to submit to the ultimate authority of Christ, and we still have all kinds of people telling us what to do. As a matter of fact, they tell us what to do, and it seems to have teeth. Right? It's not just a bark. They got a bite, because if we don't do what they say, we lose our job. We don't do what they say, we get in trouble. We get a ticket. We get thrown in jail. We get lawyers calling us and suing us. We have people that seem to have a lot of authority in our lives, and We've got to figure out how to untangle all of that, at least in our thinking. I know one day the kingdoms of the world become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he's going to reign at that point. But right now, we claim to be marching to the beat of Christ's drum. He is my king, and yet we live with all these authorities, less than perfect authorities, actually a lot of rotten authorities. How do we do that? Jesus gave us 3 profound statements in the passage that we get to here. In the middle of this week where he's about to go to the cross and be crucified on Friday, he gives us a teaching here when people were trying to trip him up with a question. Well, that may have been the context for what he says, but in these 3 sentences, he gives us profound information and guidance for us trying to think through how do we live in this world, claiming to be followers of Christ, if in fact you are, and deal with all of these demands on our lives. And nothing is more painful than April 15th when it comes down to recognizing that we've got to do what our authorities say or else we get in big trouble as tax evaders. So that was the question. The question on the table in the middle of this week between the triumphal entry and the crucifixion of Christ. And I want you to turn there and look at it with me and see if we can't leave what my goal is to have you unburdened by some of the things that may be balling up your heart right now. Because we live in a world filled with a lot of demands and things that frustrate you and frustrate me. Well, let's see if we can leave in better shape than when we came. Turn with me to Luke chapter 20, beginning in verse number 19. You remember he just told this parable. And we even kind of ventured into verse 20 last time we were together because we looked at the fact that the chief priests and the scribes were offended by what he said because they recognized this parable was told against him. So let's pick it up there again in let's start in verse 19, Luke chapter 20, verse 19. The scribes and the chief priests, they sought to lay hands on him that very hour. They were offended by all that stone that the builders rejected. And they knew we are the people rejecting Christ. And then he's saying, yet he's the cornerstone, the most important stone. And so they're frustrated with all of that. And they wanted to kill him right then, but they perceived that, because they perceived that he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they thought, as we'd seen earlier, we go and try and drag him off the Temple Mount right now. They might drag us away and kill us. So all these people that are hailing him as king, we better figure out how to do this another way. In verse number 20, Luke gives us their strategy. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere. Now remember, what you've got is 2 groups, people seething in the background, seeing Jesus here after the palm branch parade, and everyone hailing him as king. And now remember that line? They hung on every word that he said. So you got all these groupies under Christ, hearing everything that he says, taking all of his teaching to heart, and then you got all of his enemies in the background, seething how to take him down. Well, some of the people wanted to take him down. They sent the spies in to act like they were the people in the front row, the groupies of Christ, saying, hey, we hang on every word you say. But really, they were trying to catch him because they wanted to go down the street and tattle on him. They wanted to deliver him over to the authority and the jurisdiction of the governor. That's what they wanted, and they had a plan to do that. We know we can get him in trouble either with the crowds or with the governor. The governor, by the way, is Pontius Pilate. He'll end up there in 2 chapters standing before him. But right now, it's all a plan. Verse 21. So they, that is the scribes and the chief priests, look at this carefully, they asked him a question. Starting with a little flattery, an insincere flattery. Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly. You're a good teacher. You always tell the truth. You show no partiality, so we know you're going to answer this question straight up as they wink at each other. But truly, you teach truly the way of God. You're not going to lead us astray here. You're all about God, and all these people that you're teaching, all these Jews on the Temple Mount, they can't wait to hail you as king. They're saying that word, Hosanna, save us. They think you're the king of the Jews. So we know you're going to answer this right, but we got a question. It's one of those, do you still beat your wife questions, right? There's no good answer here. Can't say yes, you can't say no without somebody getting mad, and it's going to be misunderstood, and that's exactly the way they pitch it, and they ask him the question. Very simple, verse 22. Is it lawful, right? Is this the right thing? Speaking as a rabbi, a teacher. I mean, you're not an authorized rabbi, but you're teaching a lot of people the ways of God. Would God want us to? Is it lawful? Is it the thing that the Lord would want in heaven for us to give tribute, which is not, writing a poem about him. This is paying taxes, giving the poll tax to Caesar or not? Now, Caesar, of course, is a Roman emperor. He's in charge. He's the one that the Roman governors are all looking to as the ultimate authority. As a matter of fact, they deified them as gods. As a matter of fact, the current Caesar, his name was Tiberius. He was the son of Caesar Augustus, the great Caesar. And they'd already deified Augustus, thinking he was a god, and they tried to, in Tiberius' day, to deify him. They were naming cities after him. Matter of fact, the Sea of Galilee that Jesus did so much of his ministry on was named the Sea of Tiberius. You can look it up in your Bibles. They even call it that in the Gospels, the Sea of Tiberius. It was named after the emperor, the current emperor that sat on the throne right here. And they said, oh, Caesar, a Roman, wants our Jewish hard work that has been now translated into our hard-earned money. He wants some of that as tax. Now, that's the poll tax. Everyone was to give a denarius, which is 1 day's wage of a common worker, which if you want to modernize that, that's about $100. So they need $100. You come when the tax man shows up from Rome, and you give him a $100 silver coin called a denarius. Now, should we do that? Is that what God would want us to do? Now, why is that a trick question? Because if you say, yes, you should, you've got all these people wanting Jesus to be the savior of the Jewish people. They're nationalists. Some of them are zealots. They can't wait to overthrow Rome and get them out of the way. You are our hope, our Jewish hope, our Messiah. Now, you tell them that they're all supposed to pay that $100 to Rome. They're going to hate you. We know you're not going to be the popular teacher anymore right now. I mean, here we are to celebrate Passover, our Jewish festivals, and you want them to pay money, which we know is going to, this summer home in Jericho and this high resort they're building at the top of Masada, and over in Perea you're building all kinds of they're not fixing potholes in Jerusalem. You're wasting this money so that the kings of the Romans and the client kings of the Herodians can all live like gods. And you want our hard-earned money? Now, that's not going to go over well. So go ahead and tell your people that we should give money to the Romans. Or say no, which they thought that that's what he was going to say. Matter of fact, because it says up there in verse number 20, they wanted to deliver him over to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. The governor at this time was Pontius Pilate. As I said, he will end up there, but they wanted to say, okay, you say no, because we know the nationalism is strong here for the Jews. You want to defy Rome. Well, go ahead and defy Rome. We're going to go down the hall and talk to the principal about that. And the Romans, who sit there in all their Roman garb, they're going to come down and they're going to nail you to a cross as an insurrectionist. So you're either going to lose with the people and you won't be popular, or you're going to lose with the government officials and they're going to kill you. At least lock you up as a rebel rouser, fomenting some kind of rebellion against the Roman officials. So go ahead, give us an answer. We just think you're such a great teacher. They knew exactly what they were doing. Jesus masterfully, in 3 sentences, solves the problem. Verse 23. He perceived their craftiness, and he said to them, show me a denarius. That's what they require of all, right? $100, silver coin. Show me the denarius. Now let's take a look at that. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? It's got some words on it. It's got a picture of somebody's face. And they said, oh, Caesar's. Now, at this particular time, in this particular area, you have Caesar, not Augustus, Caesar Tiberius, who's reigning, and he has his coin out circulating at this point, and that's whose face is on it. As a matter of fact, if you have the worksheet, you can unfold it. Look at the bottom. I put a little replica of that, a little picture of that. It's called a Tiberius denarius at the bottom. More on that in a minute. We'll look at the inscription in a minute. But right now, you've got that, or if you've got the downloaded PDF worksheet, that's good. You can expand it and get real close to the details of all that. You've got the denarius with the picture of Tiberius' face. He's also known as the Caesar Tiberius. Okay. Why was that important? Well, we'll see that. We'll see this is a masterful response by pointing out whose picture is on it. And he says, we're going to look at both sides of this morning. He said, render to Caesar, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Oh, it's got his picture on it. Give him that coin. Oh, wait a minute, that's my money. And we'll figure out what that might have meant to them and how they were going to sort that out. Oh, and I got more to say. And there's a great parallelism here, a great analogy. And to God, the things that are God's. Now, he doesn't tell us what that is, but everybody there knew what that meant. Oh, there's an image stamped on a coin, but there's an image stamped on every human person standing here listening to me teach, including you scribes and chief priests. As a matter of fact, even the Roman governors and the jurisdiction of all those leaders and the Sanhedrin and the high priest and the priests and everyone else, everyone's got this image stamped on the image of God. They're made in the image of God. You know, we should be giving to God what's God's. Oh, that's great. And they knew it was great. And they knew because of the way he said it, they weren't going to catch him. The crowd was not diminished, and they couldn't run to Caesar and say, oh, he's telling them not to pay the tax, because he didn't say that. As a matter of fact, he said pay the tax. Verse 26, they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they said, I got nothing to say. They became silent. If you could think for a minute of Jesus here, in essence, giving the answer, pay the tax. Isn't that, look at it, right? Interpret the text. Pay the tax is actually what it is. But it's the way he does it that's so masterful that diffuses the situation. But pay the tax is the answer. Why? Because he recognizes he's got authority here over his life. Authority they didn't want to have. They didn't want the Romans to be their authority. But if you go back to Jesus' life, you can go back to his life like our lives. When we think about our lives, he had Mary as his mother, his stepdad Joseph. They were authorities in his life. We see the showdown about that early in the Gospel of Luke as he deals with his responsibilities and the distinction he feels between loyalty to God, his Father, in the temple. Remember that? And then Mary and Joseph that were mad at him because he was there too long in the temple. He also had, I don't know if he was on Little League or soccer or anything, but he certainly had other people teaching him and leading him and coaching him in his life. But then I know this, he would go every year to the Temple Mount, and what would he do? He would bring the sacrifices that were required. As he submitted himself to the priest, he would do what the priest said. If the priest said, line up here, get in line, he would do that. Then there was the chief priest, then there were the scribes, and he sat there even submitting himself. It looked like, though he was asking great questions and teaching them, he put himself under them. And not only that, this was a time when you had layers of leadership. You had the client kings, if you know that phrase. They were there as a buffer between Rome and the Jewish people. Not only did you have the priest and the high priest and the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court of the Jews, you had on top of that the Herods, Herod the Great, as it started in Jesus' life when he was a little boy. At this point, we had Herod Antipas, the son, and he was in charge right now. And then you had, as Herod Antipas ran so much of Israel, but you had Pontius Pilate, which was also now a Roman official that had jurisdiction over Jerusalem in this big swath of Judea. And then on top of that, of course, you had the Romans that were collecting taxes for the emperor, and the emperor at that time was Caesar Tiberius. If you wanted to look at Jesus living under authority, it's not much different than your life. You have multiple layers of authority. Jesus had multiple layers of authority. And in essence, the whole point of this parable is he's saying, in a way that they didn't think he would say it, pay the tax. You have authority. That authority needs to be recognized, and that's a hard thing for us to do. But let's just start before we even think about the specifics in regard to your authority. Let's just think about the fact you're going to live that way between now and heaven. Even though you have said, I'm stepping out to be now no longer governed by myself or this world. I'm stepping out from the world. I'm submitting myself to the lordship of Christ. That does not mean that all these other authorities go away. Just like for Christ, the authority himself is under authority. Therefore, let's just get used to, number one, get used to overlapping authorities. If you're taking notes, that's number one. Get used to overlapping authorities. You've got authorities over authorities over authorities, even in human life, but above that all, you've got God. So you understand, if you are a Christian, that just because you became a Christian 2 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, you still have a boss. You still have managers. You still have stockholders. You still have policemen. You still have judges. You still have lawyers. You still have assemblymen and senators and congressmen and presidents. We have these authorities that are our authorities. Now, jot this reference down, and let's think about the governor they were going to go tattle to, and they ended up tattling to him. But there's a great exchange that John records when Jesus is standing before Pilate. Write the reference down. You can look it up later. John chapter 19, verses 10 and 11. John chapter 19, 10 and 11. Now, you can imagine Pilate, who happens to be there at Passover week, because this is where he worked. He had his own palace there, place that he worked. And Jesus is in town, and everyone's making such a fuss about him because he's got massive crowds giving him a parade, and now you got all these jealous chief priests and scribes thinking he's some kind of usurper of the authority of them, and therefore they're going to go say, hey, he usurps the authority of Rome. And so you've got all this going on, and he ends up before Pontius Pilate in our gospel in chapter 23. But in chapter 19 of John, he has this exchange. He's not getting the answers coming through as clearly or passionately as he wants, although Jesus is responding. And so Pilate says this, listen, do you not know, Pilate says to Jesus, that I have authority to release you and the authority to crucify you? I mean, you can see this, right? It's like a cop, questioning some, a 19-year-old who's being, interrogated. Don't you realize I got power here? Jesus, you don't seem as concerned about this interrogation as you ought to be. I have authority to let you go. You can just go home. I could decide that. Or I could decide to put you on a Roman execution rack. And Jesus responds, verse 11, Jesus says, "You're not the boss of me." That's what he says. No. As a matter of fact, it is surprising that he doesn't. Because isn't he the boss? Jesus is the boss. He's in charge. He's the Lord. He's the King. Here's what he says. Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me." Oh, turn that sentence around. You would have no authority over me. What does that mean? You have authority over me. But you wouldn't have it unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, that's a warning from Christ. Not defying that he is in charge, but reminding him where he got that authority from. Oh, I know. You have authority to release me. You could say a word and I could walk away. And these Romans would let go of me, and if they bound me here before you, they'd have to unloose me and I could walk away. They'd loose me and I'd walk away. Or you could say, no, you're going to be crucified, which is what happens. He sends him to Herod Antipas, and he ends up having him crucified. But he says, it's not that you don't have authority, it's just that your authority comes from God. And he ends up submitting to that authority and being crucified. And he actually said at one point, I could have called, right? The gospel writers, he could have called 10,000 angels and gotten out of this. But he didn't. This is hard for us to process. I understand that. I put a bunch of resources in the back of your worksheet, including 4 messages from a series I did on Romans 13, which is a passage you need to work your way through. Romans 13 reminds us that the authorities that you have over your life, and I want you to think about what those are. Let's start, if you're a kid, it's your parents. Let's move beyond that. Your teachers, let's get down to where they are right now. Picture your boss, your manager, your supervisor, the people you report to at work. Think about the person that pulled you over, the person that's trying to make laws about your taxes and how much money you're going to get to keep from your paycheck. All of those people are authorities over your life. And the Bible says this. Let me just read a little bit. You can study it on your own. Romans 13:1. Be subject to those governing authorities. I try not to use Greek words unless they're helpful, and here's a helpful one. Governing authorities. That's great. What's the verb? Here's the command. Be subject to. Subject to. In Greek, the original language of the New Testament, hupo tasso, a compound word. Hupo means under. Tasso means to line yourself up underneath. There's a lot of lines that I might see as I go through this place or that place or next to the theater. I don't get in those lines. Not interested in getting in those lines. Well, here's a line under the authority of a person, and tasso means to line up or arrange yourself. Hupo, line yourself up underneath that authority. Even as I kind of did the gesture early on about you lining yourself up under Christ, I naturally do the gesture of what this word means. I'm lining myself up underneath the authority of Christ. Here's the command. Oh, and line yourself also up under the authority of every human governing institution. For no authority is there except from God. And those that exist have been instituted by God, whether it's in government or family or whatever it might be in your workplace. Therefore, if you're going to resist the authority that God has appointed, you're resisting God and you're going to incur some judgment. Now, here's their marching orders. They're supposed to be a terror, not for good conduct, but for bad conduct. That's what they're there for. Now, they may not be doing that like Pilate wasn't doing that. Here he had an innocent man who'd never done anything wrong, and he's threatening him with crucifixion and actually ends up crucifying him. So he's not doing it in Pilate's situation for Jesus, and maybe your boss isn't doing it. Maybe our government's not doing it. Nevertheless, that's their marching orders for which they will be held accountable. He's supposed to be a servant from God with a sword that is supposed to be used to be a servant of God and bringing God's vengeance on those who do wrong. The whole point and upshot of this gets down to where we are always most concerned, our money. Verse 6, because of this, you also pay taxes. But the authorities are supposed to be here from God. They're ministers of God, attending to this very thing, trying to do these things that God has called them to do as poorly or wrongly, or in Pilate's case, as antithetically as they may do them sometimes. Therefore, pay taxes to whom taxes are owed. They give you a tax bill, pay it. Revenue to whom revenue is owed. Maybe it's the governor, maybe it's the Herods, maybe it's the palaces they're building, maybe it's some kind of taxation or excise tax you have to pay. Pay it. And not only that, respect to whom respect is owed. I don't think they deserve it. Honor to whom honor is owed. I don't think they deserve it. I don't think they deserve my tax money. Oh, I know we're looking at the tax thing that went on in the news this last week. We think, oh, look at that, government funding for the military, whatever. Look at the pork in this stuff. You understand, when we get down to the issue on this passage that's right here, our money, you do understand that when you start looking at the things that the lobbyists get those legislators to put in those budget deals so that they can have this nonsense, funded, you and I start to think, I don't want to give you any of my money. But that sword verse reminds us that they've been given in civilized society by God, whether you like the way they spend your money, like I'm sure the Jews didn't like the way the Romans spent their money, or not. They got the sword. Because if I said to you, how much tax do you want to spend? All that stuff in the news, forget it. Don't even worry about it. How much tax do you want to spend? It'll be like the offering. We'll just pass a bag. Put in whatever you want for your taxes this year. How much are you going to put in? Don't look when the bag goes by me because I'm putting nothing in. I don't want to pay I don't pay for anything. Unless I were assured that it would go exactly to what I want it to go to. Well, let's just all do that this year. Came to church, what'd you learn? No, we're not going to pay taxes anymore. What happens? April 16th, what happens? Well, probably nothing, April 16th. April 17th, nothing. How about by September? Maybe I'll get a call. How about by next year? How about the year after that? Well, I know this. In a couple of years, I'm certainly going to be labeled a tax evader. And then I'm probably going to have some liens put against my property. I may try to get some money out of the ATM, and all of a sudden my accounts are going to be seized because they're going to seize my assets. And then they might even send me a lot of letters that seem really official, and I don't want to bother with those. So it's like the Kohl's thing. I just throw it in the trash. Don't tell my wife I threw the Kohl's thing in the trash. But let's just say I do that. Then what happens? Eventually I get a knock on my door, and they're there with the badges, and I say, I don't want to pay it. I shut the door. I guess their foot's going to go in the door probably, right? I say, get off my porch, man. Get off my property. Well, at that point, it may be their property, right? At this point, they've seized my property. And let's say they want to arrest me. I'll resist. Well, they're going to wrestle me. Well, I wrestled in high school. I might get out of that. No, they'll bring 3 guys, really big. Maybe they'll bring tasers. Well, I'll try to run. Well, go ahead and run. They're going to get you. They're going to put you before a tribunal. They might throw you in jail. And I would say, if you really don't want to pay your taxes, eventually that's where you will end up. Well, once they try to put me in jail, I'm going to run. Go ahead, try it. Everyone there is there to make sure you don't run. Well, I am going to run. Well, they've got guns. Well, I'm going to take one of their guns and point it at them. Well, great, then you'll be dead. Okay, so if we all say, I don't like taxes, I'm not going to pay them, where does this go? I know that was many links in the chain. You will end up dead. That's the point. And what's going on in Romans 13? That's the point. They don't bear the sword for nothing. Now, they don't do their job the way we'd want them to do it. But if I don't do it, they have teeth. It's not just bark, it's bite. They are able to enforce their authority and make my life miserable. Go to your work and tell your boss you don't want to do what he says. Now, in our day, you may get away with that for a couple months, but you will be fired. Eventually, you'll be fired. And what's the point? The point is that God says all of those authorities need to be seen, much like Jesus saw the authority of Pilate. You only have authority over me because God has given you that authority. But invert that statement. Because God has given you that authority, you are an authority over me. Therefore, I need to recognize all these layers of authority are providentially from God. He's put you in places, beginning with your parents, where they were your authority. And according to our passage, to get back to it, he says, you see the coin? What does it have? It's got Tiberius Caesar. Pay it. Number 2 on your outline. To get all the way down to our pocketbook, we need to realize this. We need to, number 2, honor all of our earthly authorities. Honor all of your earthly authorities. And honor is a big word because I can't narrow it down just paying your taxes or doing what they say. It's all the things that go with that, including the respect in verse number 7 of Romans 13 that says you need to give. The honor, the revenue, the taxes, and the respect. Honor your earthly authorities. Well, that is the upshot of what Jesus said. But you know how hard that was for these people to do? They worked hard for that money, and now they were giving it away. Now, if you would, look at the coin I printed there for you. I put on that digital worksheet. One of the reasons this was so hard for them is not because it's like our money. If I said, pull out your dollar bill, you go, oh, there he is, founder of our country, George Washington, right there, man. Get the 5 out. Ah, Honest Abe, that's our man. I mean, that's one thing. That's not how they were dealing with the money of the first century. In the first century, they had Caesar Tiberius. These were chief priests who, number one, many of them didn't even see that there was any way to justify putting an image of a person on a coin because they saw that as a violation of Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments. You weren't supposed to make graven images. They saw that as a graven image. They didn't want to do that. Worse than that, he said inscription. Whose inscription is that? Now, the inscription, if you look really close, or if you have the digital version, you might may be able to get in there and see it. These are Latin letters and Latin words, and unfortunately, the way they used to abbreviate in the ancient world, because they only had so much coin to work with, is to abbreviate in weird places. So it would be hard for you to figure it out based on what's there. But you can see like Ticaesar. You go, well, Ti is... Here, let me just give you the abbreviation, or let me give you the words of the abbreviation. Ti is Tiberius Caesar. Divi, okay, that's from divinitas. Does that sound familiar? God, right? Augusti, dative form. Augusti. Filius, just an F there on the coin. Augustus. So in essence, you've got Tiberius Caesar. We know that. Caesar's the title. Tiberius is his name. Then you've got the word divine August's son. Divine August's son. Now, what is that? Augustus was dead. Augustus had been deified as a god. They worshipped him in the Roman emperor, the emperor worship of Rome. They worshipped him as a god. And then it says, the last word, Augustus. Who is Augustus? So let me smooth it out. Tiberius Caesar, the August, which means respected, the August son, the respected son of the divine Augustus. Whoa. So what you've got on this coin is, here you have the Son of God, yes, the son of the god Augustus, who himself is august, and they even said in history they wanted to make Tiberius a deified god before he died. He resisted it. He's an interesting character, but he didn't want to be, and yet even here on the coin that they minted for his money here, he's already kind of God in training. And I put the back side just so you know what's on the back. Look on the back. What do you got there? You got a woman in a dress on a throne, on a chair. This is Livia. Livia is her name. Livia is Tiberius's mother, right? So this is one of the wives of Caesar Augustus. She's carrying in one hand an olive branch, and in the other she's got a stick, which is her scepter as she sits in this throne. And then here's the words on there. If you just read the Latin letters, it would be Pontiff Maxim, which is Pontifex. It's an abbreviation for Pontifex Maximus. Pontifex Maximus. Those words, Maximus, you might know, the great, right? Okay, and what is Pontifex? It's the priest, the great priest or the high priest. And it's a woman, so the high priestess. So Livia is on the back. Her name's not there, but this is the mother of Tiberius, and she is the high priest. They called her the Pax, P-A-X in Latin, the goddess. Now just think about this. Matter of fact, the other gospel writers say that Jesus said, bring me a denarius. They had to go find one because the high priests weren't going to say, oh, I got one. They didn't even like carrying these things. And in one side, you had an image, which most people stumbled over already there. And then he's the Son of God, God in training. And on the other side is his goddess mother, and she's the high priest. The high priests don't like this coin. And that's why this diffused the situation. You got enough people, as you thought about the inscription and the image, to say, yeah, the filthy money of our corrupted government. There was an immediate detachment from it, this sense of, ugh, yep, I see whose image is on it. I don't like him. I see what it says about him, what heresy, what rank blasphemy. He's getting them to think about it. You pull out your money, it's Abe Lincoln, it's Benjamin Franklin. It'd be like you pulling your money out and on it having like ISIS warriors, right? Osama bin Laden's on your $5 bill, right? Saddam Hussein is on the $100 bill. You'd be like, yep. He'd be like, pull your money out, take a look at it. Yeah, here is your money. Look at it. Part of this fallen, messed up, filthy world that you guys are a part of. Oh, the world's calling and wants some of its money back? Pfft, fine. This was a statement of detachment. This was a statement to get you to say, honor them, but you know who they are. This is the whole point of trying to unburden our hearts this morning. When it comes to the leadership and the leaders of the world, this is the balance. Here's the struggle. to get you to see that all the materialism of your corporate job, all the foolishness of the political world that we live in, all the nonsense of where your tax money goes, there's a sense in which you detach your heart from that and say, yeah, that's the world we live in. And because I became a Christian, I didn't become detached from all these things. I still live under the authority of these things. And you know what? They want a few more hours in this company? Fine. They want a few more dollars, for their weird metropolitan art display of a crucifix of Christ inverted in urine? Whatever, right? Whatever. Yeah, this was so appalling to the Jews. And he said, look at it. They want more of that? Render to Caesar what's Caesar's. Give him what they want. Now, even as I portray it that way, just to give you a sense of what it was like to be in the sandals of those people who carried around that money, I want you to realize, here's what the Bible says. Matter of fact, I'd like you to turn there. In 1 Peter chapter 2, let me just inject this thought. Can you recognize that our world is messed up? Can you realize that the corporate world, the political world, the things that go on here really are messed up? People living for themselves, the idolatry of it all, that you still can submit to these leaders and to this system in many ways in your own life as you go about your work and your labor every day. You can do it with a good attitude. Not because your heart is in it, but because your heart is somewhere else. Take a look at this text with me. Start in verse number 13. Here's our hupotasso word again. Be subject, hupo, under, tasso, align yourself. For the Lord's sake, let's make that clear, to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme. Now, when Jesus carried around that coin, or when he called for that coin, it had Caesar Tiberius on it. He died 17 years later when Peter is writing many years later, a couple decades later, the emperor on the throne now, and he was minting his own coins. You can look at some of the numismatic catalogs, and there's great resources out there about the coins they minted in the Roman government. You've got Nero now printing his own coins. Nero is now the leader, the governor, the supreme leader of the Roman Empire. Or to the governors, right? You had the tetrarchs, and you had guys like Pilate. The governors, as sent by him to punish those who do evil and praise those who do good, although they do it really poorly sometimes. But hupotasso yourself under them. For this is the will of God, that by doing good, what's the good in this passage? That I subject myself to them. They say, pay taxes, I pay taxes. They want revenue, I give revenue. They want honor, I give them honor. This is the will of God, so that by doing good, you would put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. What's the ignorance of foolish people? Luke 23, verse 1, they thought Jesus was mounting an insurrection to dethrone Caesar. They said of the early church, I know all you guys want. You won't give a pinch of that incense and say, Caesar is Lord. See there, you're insurrectionists. You want to foment some kind of rebellion. The leader should be scared of you. Look at your growing numbers, thousands of you. I know what you're going to do. Much like the Egyptians thought about the growing numbers of Hebrews. You just want to overthrow us. We don't want to overthrow your government. We're not interested in your government. The kingdom of God, whole different thing. We're not here to foment some kind of rebellion. Well, you're going to silence them if you just hupotasso yourself. You would align yourself under the leadership and do what they say. Now, live as people who are free. You're not their subjects. You're not their slaves. They don't own you. You are God's people. But you don't use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. What's the evil in this passage? Being rebellious against the authorities. You're living as servants of God. You're looking through the authorities of this earth, through your boss, through the assemblymen, through the congressmen, through the senators, through the president. You're looking to God. You're servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Honor the emperor. Hard enough in our day in Orange County to say, honor Donald Trump. Hard for me to say that when you're thinking about him paying off porn stars to shut up about his escapades, right? And I'm not here to bash him. I'm just saying that's the reality we're dealing with. And here's a passage saying, honor the leaders. Honor. Align yourself under them. And I could go back. I could go back to Barack Obama. Almost forgot his name. Barack Obama. I could get up here on a Sunday morning and say, honor Barack Obama as the supreme leader, at least in our democratic republic here. Or I could go back. George Bush, honor him. Bill Clinton, honor him. Or think if Hillary Clinton, honor Clinton. You're thinking all kinds of crazy things. Wow, I can't honor. You think about Monica Lewinsky, you think about, going back to Iran-Contra, you think of all these things that, it's hard for me to honor. I can't imagine the stuff that these people do. I can't imagine giving them my honor and respect. They were being asked to honor Nero. Look this one up on Wikipedia. Sporus. Sporus was one of the two men that Nero married. He was a young boy he used to have sex with. Talk about NAMBLA member, right? Nero was having sex with a young boy. He castrated Sporus so that he would maintain his boyish looks, so he could have him as a sex toy in the palace. He married two men along with the wives. He killed people in his family. And Reverend Peter stands up on a Sunday service, if you will, and says, honor Nero. What are you talking about? I'm saying this: align yourself under the providential leaders of your life. And when you're stuck with those leaders, you're stuck with those leaders. Honor them and do it even with a good attitude. Next verse. Let's get down to where you live, where you work. And don't think of American slavery when you read verses like this. The Greco-Roman world was filled with slaves. You could be a lawyer, a professor, all kinds of people being purchased, if you will, to do the work in society. This is really, it's a decent equivalent, though I know there were abuses even in the Greco-Roman world of us thinking about the people that have us in contract to do work for them. Servants, be subject to your masters. Here it is, with all respect. Now look at the next phrase and highlight it. Only though to the respectable. Highlight that part. Is that what it says? No, you're not looking at the passage, apparently. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 18. Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. But this is a gracious thing. When mindful of God, you endure sorrows while suffering unjustly. That's a good thing. What credit is there, by the way, if you're thinking about suffering, and you're suffering because you've sinned, you were beaten for it, well, then you endure that. Well, what good is that? But if you do good and suffer for it, and you endure that suffering, that's a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called. No way, I'm called to that? Well, that doesn't preach well in Joel Osteen's church. But here is the idea. You and I are called as long as we step out, align ourselves under the authority of Christ, and we realize this: I still got all this stuff. I got bad parents, I got a bad job, I got bad leaders, I got lawsuits here, I got laws here that are stupid, I got taxes that are exorbitant, I got all these things I don't like. Submit yourself, all respect, live under that authority, and do that. Here in this passage it says, because that's what Christ did as he stood even before Pontius Pilate. Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. And yet there he stood before Pontius Pilate. When he was reviled, he didn't revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten. He continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. And that seeped through the cracks when he said, yeah, you have authority, but you only have authority over me because it was given to you from God. Every unjust thing that we suffer, every problem that you see in politics, every time you look at someone and you say, I can't believe you're doing it. I can't believe I have to submit to that. I can't believe I have to pay for that. I don't believe I got that ticket. Whatever it is that you have to do that seems so unreasonable. The Bible says every one of those authorities that demands things not only from you as a Christian, but non-Christians, they'll be judged. Right now, though, we endure this not just with biting the bullet, I'm going to do this with a bad attitude, but it started in verse 18 in this context, with all respect. I know Pastor Bobby quoted this at the conference yesterday, but if I can just have you jot down 1 Timothy chapter 2, I'd like to remind you the first, 4, 5, 6, 7 verses of this passage make very clear something, and I got to make a distinction that many people don't make. Here's the passage. First of all, it says, I urge you that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people. So you ought to be people of prayer. And then he starts with this, for kings and for all in high positions, right? The king, Nero, right? You're going to get worse, and Diocletian and others may not have been worse, but you've got a lot of bad kings and client kings who are in high positions. Why? That we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. Peaceful, quiet, dignified. That sounds so genteel. What is that all about? I thought Paul's going to tell Timothy, you're a soldier of Christ Jesus. You're running in a race. You're fighting the good fight. It doesn't look like it here because that's not where the fight is. Let me make this super clear in this passage. Pray for your leaders. Already been told consistently, submit to those leaders on this earth. Submit to those leaders and just try to keep everything copacetic. Peaceful, quiet, dignified. Don't want to cause a problem here. No problems here. Taxes, pay them. Revenue, pay them. Respect? Yes, sir. All of that. Why? Because we've got a job to do. God, it says, is pleased by this, and he is our Savior. Oh, that's the one who desires for all people to be saved and everyone come to the knowledge of the truth. There's only one God. There's only one mediator between God and man. He gave himself as a ransom for us. Now Paul's starting to get excited. Why? Because we've got to fight. We've got a job to do. We've got borders of the kingdom to expand. Do you understand that the mentality of fighting and military motifs is all about us doing our job as Christians? When it comes to the government, when it comes to leaders, when it comes to unjust inequities in our authorities, it's like, oh, let's just make it peaceful here. Can we get through this without any problem? I'm not saying you shouldn't vote for the best candidate. I'm not even saying there's not times to make your voice be heard, maybe in a way that you ensure that it's heard. But I'm just talking about the fact that when it comes down to it, and Christians have learned this the hard way, by venturing into things they shouldn't have been into, to get back to the point that we are here to win people to Christ, to make a difference in God's economy in the kingdom. Not to try and sit here and make sure that every human institution is completely redeemed by our own action or activism. That doesn't sit well with some people because they understand it's a clear choice between good and bad in some situations, and I'm all for trying to make that clear choice for good. Don't misunderstand me. But I am saying this. When Jesus had a coin in his hand, he said, look at this corrupted, fallen world. They want some of their money back. Give it to them. But the real issue is you need to never forget who you are. Give to God what is God's. Let's finish this up. Bottom of verse 25. Give to God the things that are God's. Render that to God. Now, what is that? That's my whole life. I'm made in the image of God. I look in the mirror and I say, that is a person who thinks, reasons, intellect, emotion, will, volition. I am made in the image of God. You know what God wants? Romans 12:1, living sacrifice. Present yourself to God. I'm yours. I'm your servant. So I've stepped out in my life when I became a Christian and said, I'm going to align myself under the authority of God. Christ is my king. Didn't get rid of my boss, didn't get rid of my parents, didn't get rid of the leaders in my life, didn't get rid of all that stuff. I still have to pay taxes. But I live for God. Caesar's going to demand things from me, but I know whose I am, and I live for that. I give myself completely to God. That distinction is so important. And unfortunately, you may take out of this message a focus on all the exceptions. I don't want you to think about the times that you clash. We have to think about it, but don't dwell on the fact that sometimes Caesar asked me to do things that God does not want me to do. That's true, and it may get there. But what's my default position? 1 Timothy chapter 2, and that I just want peace. Just please let me do my job. My job is to fight for the kingdom. Can I have peace in the upstream of the authority figures on my earthly institutions? That's all I want. But know this, if ever there is a call for me to defy my ultimate authority, I will never do that. Number 3 on your outline, never defy the ultimate authority. And you know who that is, Christian. Your ultimate authority is God. And what he says cannot be in any way ever defied, resisted, or turned from. And that may be hard because it's coming in our day. Right now, we struggle with the fact that we live in a country that doesn't have the kinds of affirmations toward Judeo-Christian ethics or biblical principles that we want. I understand all that. But one day, when they turn, like they do in many parts of the world, and say, you cannot do that, then we need to stand with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, a.k.a. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And you know how they did it? They didn't do it with protests. They didn't do it with signs. When King Nebuchadnezzar said to them, I made this idol, you bow down to it. They simply said, with all due respect, no. That's what they said. We just can't. Sorry. When Peter, James, and John were told, you cannot evangelize anymore. Oh, the king said, make disciples of all nations. I'm sorry. I have to respectfully disagree, and I'm going to keep doing it. There's a way for us, I think, with civility and respect, to recognize that when authority says to us we have to do something that would make us disobedient to God, we say no. I'm so glad that I see this at work in people in our lives. I'm glad I see it at work in my own home. My 15-year-old daughter proved this to me in a very dramatic and interesting way this week when we sat and watched a movie. And I was so proud of her that she knew the difference between her dad telling her to do something that was sinful and disobedient and something that God would want her to do. And she's young and all that, but she's made a profession of faith. She knows God is her God, and she did that so clearly when we sat and watched this movie this week. And we never watched one quite like this where the spy had to kill himself with a pill. You've seen that, right? The spy takes the pill because he gets caught and cornered, and he takes the pill, and it foams up in his mouth, and he dies. And my daughter was sitting next to me on the couch, and she said, Dad, what was that? Oh, I love those moments just to be the teacher, right? Pause. That's potassium cyanide. Potassium cyanide was a pill that they put for the spies and for people that worked undercover and whatever, espionage. You had this because if you ever got caught and you might get information that's valuable, or maybe you got captured, you're going to be tortured, you could take that cyanide pill and it would kill you. That's what it was. Now, at the same time we'd been watching this movie, my daughter had been struggling with a little bit of a cold. And because of that, her eyes were watering, and I was looking into her eyes, watching, oh yeah, that's right. I've heard you sneezing a lot during this movie. I just noticed all that while I'm explaining potassium cyanide to her. And so as long as the video was stopped, I thought, oh, give me a second. I walked down the hallway, completely not aware of the context of what we had just said, to go into the medicine cabinet to get her a little antihistamine pill so she wouldn't have watery eyes. Completely innocent on my part. It was an act of love. But I walked into the dimly lit room, and I said to her, take this. My 15-year-old daughter snapped her head around at me. I just told her, this is a pill to commit suicide. We just explained it. She looked at that pill. She looked at me. She looked at the pill. She looked at me. She goes, you want me to take that? And she stopped herself before that came fully out of her mouth, and she stopped herself and said, why do you even have one of those? It had been a long day. My mind was working slowly. I thought, why do I have an antihistamine? I have those. We have those. And I realized. And my wife is sitting on the other side of her, and we all start to bust up laughing. But perhaps not for her loyalty to God's prohibition against self-murder. My daughter said, I ain't taking that pill, Dad. That's kind of the essence of what the response was that I got from her. And she realized, as I realized, of course, that's not what I meant, but the reality of it is, there may be a day when the government says to you what they said to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. There may be a time when your boss says, I need you to lie for this. There may be a time even when your marriage, your husband says, we're going to do this, and you know it is absolutely not allowed in God's economy. You have a time when you teenagers, when your parents are going to say, we're going to do this, and you know you cannot be obedient to your parents and be obedient to God at the same time. And I'm not asking for you to revolt. I'm not asking for you to carry signs. I'm not asking for you to start some protest. I'm just asking you to say respectfully, like the people in the Bible have always said, we cannot do that, and we won't. God is your ultimate authority. It's like a babysitter. Every leader in your life is the babysitter, not your parents. You know what the parents say because you read their note, you read their book, you read their instructions every day, and you're living under the authority of all of these surrogates that seem to be telling you things, and some of them you may not like. Here, we're going to eat this food for dinner. Here's the schedule. Here's what time you got to go to bed. Here's what we're going to watch on the television. Here's the volume, what it's going to have to be. And you don't like those things, but they're the authority. Submit yourself. Hupotasso. Respectfully defer to that leader in your life. All those leaders in your life. Respect them. Honor them. But at some point, if they say, eat this, watch this, do this, go there, say this, and you know that would be a violation of what your parent, your father has told you, well, then we respectfully decline. We willingly receive whatever punishment the babysitter wants to give us. If we can, if you're in a job, we say, well, I guess I have to look for another job. Some of our leaders we can't remove ourselves from, I understand. But God would have us understand whose we are. As the subtitle of this message tries to depict, we need to live as expatriates. I save that to the end because I want to show you a passage of Scripture that I think may help us adjust and pull all these elements together that we've talked about. Hebrews chapter 11, let's end there. Go with me if you would. After Jesus silences his critics with a wonderful 3-sentence description of the distinction between the world's commerce and my life that belongs to God, Hebrews chapter 11 gives us the mindset that we need. Speaking of great English words, expatriate is a great word. If you look it up in the dictionary, it'll say it comes from Latin, and that's true. It comes through Latin. It really comes from Greek. It's a transliteration of a Greek word, a compound set of words. Ex is, of course, in English, we understand that through Latin, and Greek, it is to come out of, or to be out of, taken out of. Out. Patriot, I mean, you know that from English and how we utilize it, but it comes from patrias in Greek. Patrias is the word home, homeland, one's own country, the country of one's birth, the patrias. We are to understand that our homeland is not here. Just like there are expats or expatriates living in Costa Rica that are Americans. There are Americans living in the Czech Republic, in Peru, in Germany, in Uruguay. There's Americans everywhere who are citizens of the United States, but they live under the foreign country and leadership with all the rules and regulations of another country, and they submit themselves to that country's leadership, but they're expats. They don't really have their loyalty there. It doesn't mean they're bad citizens of Uruguay. It just means they're not loyal ultimately to that country. They're expats. Their homeland is somewhere else. It's out of the place where they are. Drop down to verse number 13. This is one of my favorite passages of the Bible. All these died in faith. Who are all these? Just glance back up. Abraham, Noah, Enoch, Abel, all these people we've just talked about. Not having received the things that were promised, at least not in the temporal sphere, right? Abraham didn't get to have the promised land. All those issues of promise, the temporal realities, that's not what they got in their lifetime. But having seen them and greeted them from afar, they realized this goes beyond this life. This goes somewhere else. This goes beyond the present. And having acknowledged that when it comes to the present and this earth, they were strangers and exiles on the earth. They're aliens. This is not their home. For people who speak thus, what does that mean? They see themselves, they consider themselves strangers, exiles, aliens on this earth. They know that this is not their home. They make it clear that they are seeking, here's our Greek word, patrias. I love the translation of the ESV. They're seeking a homeland where their real home is. That's the Philippians 3:20. Our citizenship, it isn't here. It's not in Philippi. It's not in Macedonia. It's not in a Roman colony. We're citizens of heaven. For people that see themselves as strangers, exiles, aliens, expatriates, they make it clear that they're seeking a patrias, a homeland, the home of their birth. If they'd been thinking of the land from which they'd gone out, you stepped out, I hope, from the world and said, really, my authority is Christ, and you thought that might be an either-or proposition. I live for Christ, I don't live for the world. Well, the world's still got its tentacles all over your life. You have to honor them and respect them and pay their taxes. But as you live with all the Costa Rican rules, if you will, of this world, remember whose you are. Remember where you belong. Remember your homeland isn't here. I suppose you could go back and live for the world if you wanted to. It'd prove you never had it right to start with. But nevertheless, you could think that way. You could do that. Go be worldly. But as it is, they desire a better country. It isn't about this life. It's not about keeping more of my paycheck in this world. It's really not about having everything go well at this job. This is not real life. They desire a better country. That is a heavenly one. Therefore, God, one of my favorite phrases in this chapter, God is not ashamed to be called their God. I guess you could flip that over if you wanted to. It's got some teeth to it that way. I would hate to be so attached to this world and so complaining and balled up about my taxes, about the California Senate, about the congressman in D.C., and I'm so frustrated with my boss and my parents. I'd hate to be so balled up about that stuff that God say, oh, I'm ashamed that I'm his God. I mean, I thought he was one of mine, but he's acting like he belongs to that planet. It's all about those coins in his pocket. All the commerce from the Federal Reserve. That's all he cares about. But as it is, these guys weren't concerned about it. They were expats. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. You want to talk about the desire of their heart, a patrias that they want, a homeland? Yeah, he has prepared for them a city. The book of Revelation says that city is going to come down one day for people that have been seeking it all their lives, a city, the New Jerusalem. Coming down out of heaven like a bride adorned for her husband. Don't mix up the metaphor. The metaphor usually in the New Testament, we think about us as the bride and Christ as the bridegroom. That's not the picture here. The city, our patrias, our homeland, will come down out of heaven like a bride. And like we're at the end of the aisle is the groom. Here comes the city, adorned beautifully for the Christian, the husband. Only expats feel that way. You and I need to think perhaps more affectionately about our next life, a homeland. And if you do that, you're going to think a lot less about your attachments here, even your attachments to your money. It's not about you being rich, famous, or powerful in this world. It's about you and I living for the King of Kings and realizing it doesn't mean life's going to be simple. It'll be messy. It'll be complicated. But we render unto God what's God's, and that's the whole of our lives, holding loosely to everything else. Let's pray. God, help us in a world that makes this very difficult to live out. It is difficult, but it's nothing compared to what it's been for the early church. Nothing compared to what it's like for Christians right now in Syria or in Iraq or Iran. Nothing, really, compared to those who tried to live for the truth and live and be faithful to God in the medieval days of church history. God, in that regard, we know we're part of a band of brothers and sisters that went before us and even live right now around the world, suffering great things because they are being faithful, longing for their homeland. Let us in our own hearts live for that. Let us know that this world is not our home. Let us be willing to see ourselves as expatriates in this world so that you would not be ashamed to call us your God. God, thanks for this reminder from your word and the brilliance of Christ being able to give us a great example as to how to diffuse this problem here. More importantly, the lesson that it teaches us. Thanks for giving us this feeding of the word this morning. Dismiss us now with a heart for the next life and a detachment in many ways from all the things that make us anxious about this world. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. You are dismissed.